Welcome to the Good Growing Podcast. I am Chris Enroth, horticulture educator with University of Illinois Extension, coming at you from Macomb, Illinois, and it is turning to fall, folks. I'm so excited. Ate lunch outside today. It was breezy but delightful. Had some, just like a delicious tomato sandwich, like fresh tomato. Oh, it was great. And we have a great show for you today. We're going to be talking with Eliana Brown and Layne Knoche. We're going to be talking about rain gardens and how you can do this yourself and what they're doing on campus. It is going to be a jam-packed show, so we got to dive into it, but I cannot do this by myself. I am joined, as always, with our co-host every single week, local foods educator, Katie Parker. Hi, Katie.
Hey, Chris. How's it going?
Oh, I'm living the dream here in the Macomb land. How about yourself?
Oh, of course. How was Farm Progress show last week?
It was fantastic. I got to hang out with my buddy Ken. And we actually got to showcase some pollinator garden plants that actually were designed by the guests that we have on today. And I got this really cool hat.
Oh, awesome. I saw pictures and it looked really cool too.
Zoom doesn't like it. It's going to blur it out. But yeah. And I got Ken a hat too, but I don't know if he'll wear it. But yeah. But someone who I knows probably will not be wearing that hat. You'll have to tell us why, Ken. Is Ken Johnson, horticulture educator in Jacksonville. Hi, Ken.
I probably will not be wearing it because I have an abnormally large head.
It gets
bigger.
And it does not fit. It gets bigger. I can make it really big.
I'll give it to my kids. They can wear it.
Can you and my boyfriend both? We get so many free seed hats and he can't wear a single one of them.
I just didn't want to say you had a big head, Ken. So Ken texted Katie and me like late, what was it, 2 nights ago? Like it was midnight or something. Yeah. And you were having fun with what was it, Ken? Tell the folks what you're texting us.
So I had a blacklight flashlight that was up on my mom's house, and she had some tomatoes that were missing leaves. So we took a blacklight out and we're looking for hornworm caterpillars. And we found quite a few. And the cool thing about them is they'll fluoresce under blacklight. So the leaves kind of turn a purplish, blackish color, and the caterpillars are kind of a blue-green. So you have that blacklight, you can see them pretty easily. So collected, I think, about 10 of them, brought them home. I'm going to cook them up, see what they taste like, and report back next week.
Well, that was fun to get that. Yeah. And then I'll share my tomatoes. So remember this darn blur, the WIU tomatoes, we're doing the purple and gold tomatoes. Well, this is Yellow Dragon. Just pulled this off the vine today. So it's got the purple top and then the kind of that yellow gold body for the most part. Pretty cool. And then this is Brad's Atomic Grape. Still kind of got that purple gold color. So we have several other cultivars that we're trialing, and no tomato hornworms yet, but I now know how to detect them.
Yes, keyword is yet.
Yes. And that's another thing we're going to have to try to eat in addition to cicadas, is the tomato hornworm. So they taste like tomatoes.
We're just going to have a whole show on eating insects.
Yes, we can invite our current day guests back for that one. and speaking of our topic today, we are going to be talking about rain gardens, and a very specific rain garden. And then we're going to talk about, doing this in our own backyard. And so let's introduce our guests for today. So we're joined by Eliana Brown and Layne Knoche. So Eliana, and we'll start with you. Could you tell me your actual title, because you're doing a lot of stuff, you and Layne. So what are you titled these days?
Sure. And we have a third team member too, Kate Gardner, who also works with this. But my title is Extension Water Quality Specialist.
Okay. And then Layne, how about yourself?
I am an Extension Outreach Associate.
Excellent.
That's my title.
Yes. And I've been having fun with titles, and I'm trying to stretch mine out as long as possible these days. So, and then people don't want to talk to me after that. That's great. So today we are going to talk about a specific rain garden, the red oak rain garden, which you both have, I would say, have turned the corner. You've turned it around. You've built it into something grand. So red oak rain garden, and you guys, you abbreviated RORG, and in my brain, I read RORG. I don't know if you both do that too, but I do.
We lovingly
Absolutely.
call it RORG. Yeah.
RORG.
Yes.
Yep.
Very orcish. Yes.
Yes.
RORG. So Eliana, in your day-to-day job, you are tackling stormwater issues regionally throughout the state, throughout the Midwest. You're, as I call it, saving the world. So as you're saving the world, this was a couple years ago, you decide, hey, let's put a rain garden on campus. Can you tell me why you went from like looking at regional scale problems and now looking at something specific? Why on campus and why a rain garden?
Oh, that's a great question, Chris. So, you know, the university campus, of course, is built between the great cities of Champaign and Urbana. And if you look back in history before the university was here, there are accounts of trade that would happen between the two cities, like by carriage, but they had to put down these wood planks between the cities. There wasn't city there, but they had to do that so because it was so wet that the carriages would just sink. And so what we have done, of course, is we've put the university in, lots of drainage has happened. And with that drainage, with all of these tiles that go in and all of the roofs, you can have some degradation to water quality. Of course, our sewers can become undersized as time goes by, and we have a lot more impervious surface, a lot more runoff, more rain. So what we are doing with a rain garden is taking that original land, that original kind of the way that it was, and working with it. So we're mimicking the natural processes that were here before. Now you're kind of limiting it, right, to where the water can stand, and you are increasing the infiltration of the soil. So that will drain out and dry up before mosquitoes can hatch. So, you know, we're not kind of creating that thing. But what we're doing is taking it back, utilizing the land and utilizing it intelligently to work with it.
Yeah, so the water, you're not treating it as necessarily, say, a nuisance. You're trying to utilize it perhaps again as a resource. Yeah, so very cool.
Yeah, exactly. In this particular rain garden, there are two iterations of it. So there was the original rain garden was built in 2006, started out in 2005, and I was part of that as well. And at that time, there was this huge water problem that was there. Like I was mentioning, how if you can imagine, this would have been one of those places where they'd have to put the planks down because there was a lot of water every time it rained, would go across the sidewalk. So the original function of the rain garden was to drain water away from the sidewalk and also away from that red oak. As you all know, red oaks don't like to have wet feet. And so the water was trained in such a way to take it closer to that sycamore tree, which can tolerate water so much better.
So Eliana, at what point did you decide to bring Layne into working on RORG?
Well, so in about 2016, I think, after I taught one of the Master Naturalist classes, I met Karen Folk, who is now our lead Master Naturalist, and she expressed an interest in renovating the garden. The garden by that point hadn't received the attention that it really needed, and so it was overgrown. There were maintenance issues with it, and with Karen's interest and with some other interest on campus, I decided to take on the renovation project. Now, around that time, maybe a little later than that, maybe a year or so later, I was invited to Katie Krzyzewska's class that Layne happened to be taking to do a modified Rainscaping program for their class. And this very nice student came afterwards to set aside some time to talk to me about rain gardens. And that is how I really had my first conversation with Layne. About 5 minutes into the conversation, I offered him a job. So that's because quick as that was, he was so impressive. And originally the job was to develop these brochures that that a lot of people really love. So Layne was originally hired to create the designs for the brochures and really develop them. A little while later, one of the original students that I was working with graduated, and so I needed to have a student designer work on the garden, and I asked Layne if he would do it, and thank goodness he said yes.
And here I am 4 years later.
We got him.
And the rest is history. So Layne, when you first kind of heard about this project, what were your feelings about creating or designing a rain garden on campus?
So I'll be completely honest. I was a little bit nervous. As Eliana said, I was still a student in landscape architecture when the redesign was being planned, and eventually when I was brought onto the design team. So I knew the Red Oak Rain Garden as its pre-renovation self. I do remember that it was still functioning as a rain garden, but the few plants that were left from that original 2006 planting had gone pretty wild. And really what was left was silted in rock and weeds. And campus is no small place, and the garden is in a very highly visible location. I think we have something like 52,000 students on campus. So my biggest fear was that we were going to create something that would be doomed to repeat that 2006 the plants from that. So I was very nervous about that. But my fears were really lessened when Eliana convinced me that we had all of these amazing lessons learned from the original garden, and all of those lessons would inform the new design of the garden and to help us prepare it for the future. And here we are. We are 2 full years since the renovation, and it's doing very well since. So we really just wanted to make sure that the garden would perform its stormwater functions well, but also be this beautiful spot on campus where all the students, the faculty, community members can appreciate and engage with the garden as they pass by.
Well,
Thank you for believing me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for convincing me. You are absolutely right.
It sounds like a Field of Dreams scenario. If you build it, they will come. And I think you guys have done that. Yes. And now the Yankees.
Pollinators too, Chris.
Right.
Pollinators are there. Yes. Oh, that's so cool. Layne, you're talking about the kind of that initial feeling. So walk us through the design process and tell us a little bit about where you started in terms of like the layout and who inspired you for what eventually came to be.
Sure. So as I mentioned, my background is in landscape architecture. We dabbled a bit in planting design back when I was a student, but that's always really been a focus of mine. I have a big passion for native plants. And so to have the opportunity to work with a rain garden that's 10,000 square feet on campus, and to get to work with all of these amazing native plants was really an exciting prospect for me. I draw a lot of inspiration off of amazing designers like Pete Aldoff, Roy Diblick, Thomas Rayner and Claudia West, who are the authors of this amazing book called Planting in a Post-Wild World, which I'll probably be talking about at some point in this podcast, but I actually got to meet Thomas with Eliana a couple of years ago. I actually get to have some conversation with him about this garden in particular, which was really amazing. But you know, the way that these designers work with plants and the textures and the color and the seasonality of, you know, so many incredible plant species. You know, I draw a lot of inspiration from massing and designing with drifts of color and texture. You know, and I try to channel some of their energy into the designs that I do, not only with the Red Oak Rain Garden, but with other work that I do as well. You know, and then having to combine that kind of design with specifically native species. I had a goal to have about 95% of the species at the rain garden be straight native species. I didn't work with very many nativars or non-native plants. There are some, but you know, that was a goal of mine, was to do a lot of native species and show people that it can be done with straight Illinois native species. On top of that complexity, we have a rain garden where we've got, at the top of the rain garden, your dry conditions. At the bottom of your rain garden, you've got the wet conditions and everything in between. And then add on that complexity, the fact that we have full sun areas and full shade areas with both dry and wet conditions in those locations as well. So we almost have like 6 biomes of sorts within the garden. And so narrowing down that native plant selection and you know, trying to develop the masses of color and texture through there was a challenge, but I think it turned out pretty well. And, you know, I hope that Thomas Rayner would be proud.
I'm sure, of course he is. So Layne, curious, from a design perspective, and knowing that very often lots of pieces of trash paper wind up where the appropriately called the trash can. Just so like people realize, and maybe your first one was perfect and was spot on, but when you're going through a design process, does it help you trying like I'm going to draw out a plan like this, but it might not look the same? Does your plan look the same as when you originally began, or has it evolved and changed? Is it still evolving?
That's a fantastic question. The current iteration of the garden does not look like the original plan that we put together for the renovation in 2019. In 2019, I don't remember the exact number of species that we had spec'd, but it was something like 80, I think, species that we wanted to use. And I want to sort of explain that number. You know, we do have those 6 quote unquote biome conditions within the garden. So we do have to have a little bit more of a varied plant selection than you'd have in most more simple gardens. But 80 species was a lot. Looking at that plan today, you know, I look back at that and I recognize that, you know, there might have been specific areas of that design that might have looked messy because there's just a bit too much going on. And then, you know, we rely on volunteers to do a lot of the maintenance work, the care work at the garden, and getting people to recognize with and work with 80 species of native plants that they might not be familiar with, you know, that could have been a real issue. So in the iterations of design that came after that, first, you know, we started to hone in on the species that we wanted to work with. And I think we narrowed it down to 54 instead of 80. So it's still a lot of species, but 54 is more manageable than 80. And so far it's gone very well. We're actually developing a field guide for our volunteers to be able to take out into the garden with them and to know and understand how to work with the 54 species that we do have. I also appreciate that you asked the question of, you know, whether the garden is still evolving. It is, in short. And it's evolving in multiple ways. We're expanding the garden this year, which I think Eliana and I will talk about later on. But we also have the idea of adaptive maintenance going forward. So if there is a specific species that does not do well in the garden for whatever reason, whether it's cultural or it's difficult for people to work with, or it just gets out of hand, that's something that we fully anticipate will come in and edit down the road, whether that is by simply removing the species in question and replacing it with something else, or developing maintenance practices to mitigate the bad qualities that we're seeing from a specific species.
I'm gonna jump in and add to that as well. Our funding for the renovation was from the Student Sustainability Committee, and with student designers, part of the process of that is making sure that you have professional review. And so with the review that we got from Jack Pizzo, the Pizzo group, he's the one that pointed out that we had too many species and really needed to limit it. I think he wanted it even limited further, but it was just not going to go. And he was right. Well, he was right that, well, I guess maybe we were right. 50, however we ended up, I think was about the right number. And that was really part of designing with maintenance in mind. So that our volunteers would be able to recognize the plants. So it was I hope, Layne, that it helped make your design process and hone it, make it more refined. And with that limit, you had to be really selective of what plants went in. And I know we're going to talk a little bit about doing this in your own backyard, and that's one lesson that I think that we can all have for our gardens, is just to be really selective of the plants that make it into the design.
Absolutely.
Can you guys tell us a little bit about how it was getting campus to approve the Red Oak Rain Garden on campus? And then also, were they involved in the design of it? Did they have say in what you guys did?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So because the garden there had been an iteration of the garden from before, we were grandfathered in. We did not have to get brand new approval for rain garden on campus. That said, I hope at this point that what we have done is really made it easier for more rain gardens to happen on campus. We are really lucky. Layne and I get to work with Brent Lewis, who is the campus landscape architect. Whenever we're even coming up with new ideas or thinking about doing anything differently, we bring Brent in immediately to get his thoughts on what we're doing. He's part of the campus architectural review committee, so that's the formal process, but he always gives us a heads up on what he thinks will be a go and what is not a go. And that includes, beyond the planting design, there was the engineering design, the design of the bridge, for example, too. Those are other things that we needed to work with them. Brent is not formally part of our team, but I think Layne and I have now worked with him so much that we think of him as family. So, which is great. We're really lucky to be able to work with them.
All right, so you've mentioned that the Red Oak Rain Garden has two large trees near it. So when it came to kind of constructing the garden, were you doing any kind of earthwork, and did you have to take any kind of precautions working around those trees when installing the garden?
How about I take first part, and then Layne, maybe you can jump in.
Sure.
So during the original build, we worked with the Urbana arborist, the city of Urbana arborist, and so the original build that one was not near the red oak at all. So it was the sycamore. We used an air knife in order to be able to make that excavation happen. Fast forward to 2019, and there wasn't a whole lot of reshaping that needed to be done around the sycamore, but the red oak was a different story. And so happily, we know Ryan Pankow, and he had connections with his former employer at Arbor Smith, and Greg Smith, and Ryan came and did a whole tree map, or a root map rather. They mapped out all of the roots of that red oak, which then we actually had to change some of the little bit of the flow pattern of the garden. So the excavation was altered so that we could minimize any damage to the red oak. On our portion of the garden that doesn't have trees, we were able to do some additional digging and put in an engineered soil. We could not, of course, do that on the tree side, but what we were able to do was an application of mycorrhizal inoculant. I'm saying it was Layne, I think you were the one who did that application.
Yeah.
So you did that over the entire garden, which I think I understand can be helpful for the tree and certainly help the infiltration. Layne, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I was just gonna mention, Eliana said something about a bridge being at the garden. Part of the reason why we have that bridge and not, say, a sidewalk is because if we had installed a sidewalk, it would have basically gone over the tree roots. And all of that additional soil plus the concrete on top of roots like that is a bad deal. And I mean, what's not to love about a boardwalk bridge? And we were able to minimize the amount of damage that would be done to the tree roots, by having the bridge go over all of them instead of laying on top of them like a sidewalk would.
I give a shout out to our professional engineer, Tony Heath, who was part of our team, but that was Tony's suggestion, which was a fantastic one. And we were able to work with a structural engineering professor, Bill Gamble, to help make that a reality.
Yeah, and Shannon Tucker too.
Oh, Shannon, absolutely. Thank you for
lot-
mentioning
did a lot
Shannon.
with us over the last couple of months to get that built. So
Yeah, she's been our construction manager.
and while we're giving the shout outs, how about Allerton Park?
Yes.
For their gift of the sustainably sourced black locust lumber that they provided for the construction of the bridge. It's really beautiful, and we've gotten a lot of amazing compliments about it since. Not to mention the fact that there are literally thousands of people that walk over it every day now. So
yeah. The bridge and much of the expansion was funded by the Illinois Clean Energy Community Foundation. So we'll end. There's a lot of people we could give additional shout outs to, because
right.
it's a village, right? But just really grateful for all of the donors and supporters.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of while we're talking about the bridge, and I know this is fairly new to the garden, where can folks go find pictures of this stuff and get updates of the Red Oak Rain Garden?
Layne,
you want to give them the URL?
Sure. So we have a website, www.redoakraingarden.org. And then we are on basically all of the social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Our handle is @RainGardenUIUC. But if you just search for Red Oak Rain Garden, I'm sure you will find us.
The Red Oak Rain Garden is very busy on social media. Sometimes it's the trees that are tweeting. Sometimes it's the sunny cells. Sometimes I think it's the pollinators.
Yeah.
It's pretty.
Sometimes
active.
It's me if there's just some really cool native plant out there, and I'm like, you know what? I just got to give my nerdy explanation of why this is such a cool plant.
Yeah.
So sometimes I might sneak in there with the pollinators, but usually the tweets are from the garden itself.
Yeah. If there are any dorky 80s references, it might be me. But
Who's the sassy person? There sometimes
we're all
the Red Oak Rain
sassy.
Garden is sassy. Okay.
We're all
That would be-
everyone.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that started with Kate Gardner.
It did.
Kate Gardner was the original sassy rain garden. She really laid
Yep.
the template for the voice of the rain garden. Yeah, it's it, you know, Ken, Katie, and Chris, if you ever want to do a rain garden social media takeover, you can be sassy too. We would love that. Wendy, you as well.
Oh, that sounds like fun.
Yeah, right.
I can
Do it.
Start yelling at students, stop spitting your gum in me. Knock it off.
Hey,
What
we
look
do
like an
have,
ashtray?
Get
we
off
do
my
have a new
lawn. I mean,
trash
get off my rain garden.
yeah.
Rain, what? Layne, what did you say?
Oh, I was just going to mention that that facilities and services did get us a trash can and a recycle bin.
Yes.
So we don't have quite
Yes.
as much of an issue with trash as we did before, which is really nice.
Yeah, it's a really, those are really nice looking trash cans too. I know that's kind of a funny thing to
Probably
say,
won't-
but they are.
Probably won't make it into the podcast, but I really have noticed a huge decrease in the amount of trash that we've had in the garden since those trash cans got put in. So
I really
Really?
hope that does make it into the podcast, 'cause we appreciate
thank you
it.
for not littering.
That's actually doing landscape maintenance a long time ago. You lift up a plant and there's just a garbage can worth of stuff. And it's frustrating, but it's just like, just pick up
Eliana,
trash.
should I tell them?
No.
Oh, no.
I'll
Oh,
have to
no.
put it in the podcast.
We have also the good growing after dark. So
Okay. Well, see, in that version, it might be appropriate.
well, okay. So I do have a question. Layne, you mentioned 10,000 square foot rain garden. That is a large footprint. And the style that you mentioned, Pete and Roy, Claudia, Thomas, they plant lots of plants in small spaces. So tell me about your source material. You mentioned native plants, but what did you order? And then if I've seen it, but, and listeners who are listening, that may be thinking like, well, that's a lot of plants. How do you get them all on the ground? Could you explain a bit about your source material and then how you got all that stuff in the ground?
So yeah, it's a lot of native plants. I think in the 2019 renovation, we brought in about 9,000 plants. They came from Piso Native Plant Nursery, Midwest Ground Covers, Possibility Place, and North Creek Nurseries from Pennsylvania. So we had plants brought in from all over the place to go into the garden. Of those 9,000, something like 5,000 were ground cover species, specifically some sedges, low growing grasses. We also had a couple of more showy flowering ground cover types that went into the garden. We got quite a few shrubs from Possibility Place. In our shady conditions, we've got a decent number of shade loving shrubs out there. We've got our winterberries and spice bush. Spice bush, I think, is probably one of my favorites, but the all-time favorite red oak rain garden plant is red chokeberry. And I think I talked about that the last time that I was here, but so circle back to that one when you've got a chance. But red chokeberry is a great plant. So yeah, that was a lot of native species that we brought in for that renovation. Last fall, so fall of 2020, we brought in even more native plants. I think it was something like 3,200 additional plants that we brought in. We did a lot of Virginia bluebells, which had always sort of been a goal of ours. And then we paired them with a tulip from Brenton and Becky's called Princess Irene.
Here.
And it is orange. It's like the true Illini orange as well. So we've got, so Eliana
There.
just showed your
Yeah.
screen. Yeah.
It's
To
good
the,
cue.
to the orange and blue. So we brought in 2,500 of those Princess Irene tulips to bloom with our several hundred Virginia bluebells. And the landscape designer in me that graduated from landscape architecture might have been screaming a little bit about doing something that was orange and blue on an orange and blue campus, but it really was fantastic. I think that's our new staple floral display. It was, in our first year, the number of people that came out to photograph our orange and blue was pretty cool. And that was before the bridge was there, so the garden wasn't even really done yet, and people were just flocking to see it. This year we are bringing in more plants. I think this is probably going to be the last big expansion that we do at the garden, at least for a long time. These plants are going to be coming from Country Arbors in Urbana. And this time we are not just doing native plants, we're also bringing in a couple of nativars. There are a couple that I've been wanting to try out, and this fall's installation is really going to create a gateway into the garden from the street. If you've been to the garden, you know that it's sort of off the street a ways. It's not the showiest from where you're driving. But with the installation this fall, you're going to see the garden, and we're really excited about that.
The orange tulips were spectacular, and
Yeah.
we want to give Martha Smith, retired now port educator Martha Smith, a shout out. She said that Princess Irene was that quintessential U of I orange color, and she was right. I also want to say something about the number of ground cover. That was a huge takeaway for me, and something that I really learned from the Planting in a Post-Wild World. For a non-designer who has a yard and wants it to be pretty and manageable and wants to use native plants, having that 75% ground cover is so key. I kind of liken it to in my clothing wardrobe. It's like I have a lot of jeans and a lot of black pants, and that's kind of like my ground cover, right? It's like it's there as the background for other kind of showier things. And when you're at the native plant nursery or the nursery or whatever, just selecting plants, it's easy to want to gravitate to the really showy things, but it's those ground covers that give you that really good design. For a non-designer, really helpful. Layne already knew that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, just the number of inputs that are reduced by having this dense ground cover is remarkable, and we've gotten to live that now with the Red Oak Rain Garden. Developing that green mulch of sorts. You're not bringing in mulch to cover the ground every year, or if you're using a dyed mulch on top of that, we just always have this dense mat of green across the whole garden that's functioning not just in that way, but also for overwintering pollinators and all of that sort of ecologic side of things. And then the fact that they're helping to shade out the weeds that are trying to grow up through the garden is helping us to reduce the care that has to go into the garden. It doesn't mean that there is no care, because there's definitely still a lot, but having that weed suppression is really, really fantastic. And installing all of that was definitely a task. I don't remember, I was keeping track of the number of holes that I drilled myself. It was many
7,312.
It was something like that.
Wow.
It was many thousand that I had drilled, along with this incredible team that we also had out there. There's more thank yous to be had in there, but that's continuing this year. Basically, my method is to go out there and grid off the garden. I think I was using 20-foot by 20-foot squares. You can definitely scale that down for smaller residential sized gardens, but I went out there with some marking paint and with some string lines and sticks. And I just made a 20-foot by 20-foot square. I translated what I had drawn on paper, onto the surface of the garden. So I draw out the circles where a specific plant species would go. And then I started drilling holes. I used a 3 or 3.5 inch, I can't remember the exact size, auger bit for a drill. And
3.5.
I think it was 3.5.
Yeah,
that sounds right. I just started drilling holes for all of those. Those mostly were for the ground cover species because there were just so many of them. Typically in landscape design, you would go for a more naturalistic look, where you'd have sort of randomized locations of all of those. Typically, the ones that we did were about 15 inches on center, across the 10,000 square feet. That's why we get the high numbers, right? But in our case, knowing that it is such a large space that is heavily reliant on our volunteers and their knowledge of the plant species, we did the plants basically in rows. So a very gridded pattern of ground covers. And what that did was it allowed our volunteers to learn the plants that were out there, to experience them, one-on-one in their first few seasons. And then when a plant would pop up outside of that grid, then it would be obvious that one doesn't belong there. That's a weed, that one needs to be removed. And it worked out really well. The first 2 years, that was the case. And now we're sort of to the point where those ground covers are really starting to grow together. So that heavily gridded look is starting to disappear, which I think is probably a good thing. Although there's something to be said about having nice gridded rows. They kind of look like an agricultural field. We're here in Champaign where we're surrounded by corn and soybeans. So, maybe somebody might have been able to make an argument that I did that intentionally. I did not, but I'm glad that somebody found the joy in that. And that somebody, I think, was Eliana. So
completely was.
But yeah, so a lot of the ground covers that we put in were small. They were plugs, so 3-inch plants for the most part. And then we came in with some of our seasonal plants, which are, like your coneflowers or your black-eyed Susans, something like that. We would come in with slightly larger sizes for that, quart up to gallon size. And then our structural plants, like a lot of our shrubs, most of those came in 5-gallon buckets. So the whole sizes definitely varied, but you just sort of adapt and work with what you've got.
And for establishment, did you get good success with plugging in those ground covers? And you had mentioned the ground covers are there to kind of take the place of mulch, but did you have to use mulch there in the beginning?
Great question. Yes, we had mulch down in the beginning. We put the mulch down first because we were going in with so many plants. It just was not going to be feasible to try to, go out there with buckets or with wheelbarrows and try to put mulch in between every single one. So we put the mulch down first. I think our goal was to have between 2 and 3 inches of mulch across the whole garden. We just used a shredded hardwood. We haven't really had to do much mulch work since then. The ground covers have done very well. We installed the plants in fall of 2019. We did have a few plants that had issues with frost heave, but really we didn't have a big issue with that. And I think when I did inventory last spring, I counted the number of plants that we lost, and it was only something like 20.
I remember
9,000 that we put in.
Brent Lewis was really impressed by the number.
Typically, I think you're supposed to expect something like an 8% dieback or something like that with an installation similar to what we did. And I think that we were at like less than 1% of deaths. So really, we had very good luck with and success. I don't know if I want to call it luck because I mean, it was all intentional, but it established itself very, very well.
It was all good, and we were really glad it did, because as Layne mentioned, it was established in the fall of 2019, and in the spring of 2020, when we were really expecting all of our volunteers to come out and do our first reading, the coronavirus had other plans for us. So spring of 2020, it was just such a really fortunate thing that so many plants did well to be able to shade out as many weeds as possible. The mulch down first and the kind of mulch we used is that was a method indicated by the Rainscaping training program. And so many of the things that we learned from the Rainscaping program and from some of our advisors like Jack Pizzo have gone into the garden. And as we are gearing up to do Rainscaping programs throughout the state, some of the things that the information is going to go the other way. The Red Oak Rain Garden will serve as a design inspiration, and the lessons learned from the garden will go on to inform some of the gardens that happen as part of that education program.
There's our segue to Rainscaping.
Yeah.
if that's okay.
It was pretty sly, wasn't it?
I was like, I see what you're doing.
Well, yes, in light of that, talking about the Rainscaping program, Eliana, tell us a little bit more about what in the world is this thing?
Well, I'm so glad you asked. So the Rainscaping education program is based on a program at Purdue. It's a 2-day or 4-evening course that includes a hand-on demonstration rain garden build. The course itself covers why rain gardens are important, how to site and size them properly, how to design the plants, and how to maintain them. It's not a beginner course. One thing I do want to mention, it is a course that is intended for people with baseline knowledge, like master gardeners and master naturalists. The master gardeners and master naturalists are with that baseline knowledge. For us at the Red Oak Rain Garden, those are our major volunteers, the Champaign County Master Gardeners and East Central Illinois Master Naturalists. So there is this fall a Rainscaping class that's happening in Champaign County. So we're expecting several of our volunteers to be attending. We also have an offering in Effingham County.
And reach out to, I would say, if folks are interested in learning more about Red Oak Rain Garden, please visit the website, follow them on the social medias, but reach out to Eliana, Layne, both Ken and myself. We both took the Rainscaping training, and so we're happy to offer assistance throughout the state, wherever you're located.
Do you guys often hold some beneficial activities and different things for people to get involved? And this, I think, just pre-COVID, you guys did the Mulch Madness, which was something that was really cool. Who came up with this idea, and what kind of gave you that idea?
Well, the originator of the idea was the original sassy voice of the Rain Garden, Ms. Kate Gardner. And right before COVID, she was talking about doing this kind of NCAA style influenced parody for plants. And as we were working with our comm team on how that could be, Matt Wiley, the extension graphic designer, came up with the name Mulch Madness, which was just brilliant, we think. But then Layne, Kate, and I, that was our lockdown activity, was coming up with what became Mulch Madness, making all of the descriptions, how we were going to do it. the actual workings of the social media was based off of a museum in Indiana that did something with something similar with historical people in history. Layne, do you want to talk a little bit about all of the descriptions? You were the descriptions. I mean, I know we kind of workshopped. You wrote the serious descriptions, and then it was okay. Let's pack some jokes in there.
Right. I got to channelize my inner plant nerd, which really isn't
Inner.
very inner. Right. I got to channelize my plant nerd self into the
So hidden,
descriptions.
Layne.
Right. The bios for all of the plant species that we worked with, that were the teams, competing against each other in the Mulch Madness competition. We had the competition across all of our social media platforms, so we adapted, the layout, the format of each game specifically for polling on Facebook, on Instagram, and on Twitter. And I can't remember the exact number, but I mean, we reached tens of thousands of people with our 2020 competition. So, we couldn't leave the Roarg fans hanging for 2021. So of course we brought it back, and it'll be an annual thing from now on. We're really looking forward to it. I think there might be some exciting, variations of Mulch Madness coming up, because, we'll throw in a couple of new species, or we'll take some out. This year, I pitted the number 1 and number 2 teams from the 2020 competition. I pitted them against each other, so only one of them could move on. So that was fun. I had some people, that weren't all too happy about that, but it made for an interesting competition, didn't it?
That's the ball game.
Yeah. This spring, we had an incredible student intern working with us. Her name was Sandra Bjerga. She ran a lot of the social media for Mulch Madness, so big thanks to her for running all of that for us. She did a fantastic job.
The first in 2020, because so many were on lockdown, that we may have had a captive audience, but for 2021, it was about the same numbers. So we may have had repeat customers. So we do encourage everyone to check back with us in March of 2022 and get your brackets in. What
species won the last 2 years? And in my brain, I'm thinking of these as teams. So yes,
Here,
yeah.
we'll do the drum roll. Layne, you can you can tell the winners.
Right. Drum roll. So this year's the 2021 Mulch Madness champion was Virginia Bluebells. It was the newcomer. I think
Cinderella
there
story.
might have been right. I think there might have been a little bit of bias, because the bluebells are the first thing to bloom in the year, and this is the first year we had them in the garden, and they were beautiful right at the time when they were competing for Mulch Madness. So we'll see. I think it's a great choice, though. The first champion, the 2020 champion, was a butterfly weed, Asclepias tuberosa. Also could be biased because it is orange on the University of Illinois campus, and that's the color to be. So those are our 2 champions so far. I for one am hoping for Nodding Onion, Allium Cernune next year, but your votes will tell.
My money's always on purple coneflower. I don't think you can count that team out. It's it's a winner in every garden, in every playing field.
It's a perennial favorite.
Ooh, ouch.
I stole that from Eliana. Eliana gave me that one.
When we were lockdown workshopping, it's yeah.
So could Matt Wiley get you guys in like a studio and do kind of like a Sports Center themed? Like what you just did would be fantastic. Like your picks. Yeah.
That's
it needs
such
to
a
happen.
great idea.
It
Can't
needs to
wait.
Play
happen.
by play.
I
Just
love
need a
that.
green screen behind you. It'll be great.
That's a fantastic idea.
I can't wait. That is so good.
March 2022 can't get here soon enough. It's probably gonna have to happen in
No.
like January. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
yeah,
Okay.
that's a great idea.
Yeah, Wendy just typed in the chat box diagram to play. You could have the rain garden on there and you'd be like, all right, this one's blooming right now, but watch out, here comes this one. You go, oh
my
yeah,
gosh.
this will be fun.
My mind is being blown. That's such a good
Their
idea.
mind.
We may have to have some special commentators on that.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
pretty
Growing
yeah.
team.
We'll send it over to Katie at the board.
Mhm.
Yeah,
That would be fun. So
It's the-
yeah.
It's the kind of
That's
day
fantastic idea.
any Forb can win and any Forb could lose.
Yes.
No, and
Yes.
you do know what we call the our final four teams. That's when you
Final
make it to the
Final Forbes.
the final
Forbes.
Forbes.
Yep. Yep. They even have their own logo.
Wow.
You might want to edit out whatever sound came out of my mouth. I don't know what it was. It was, I think, a combination of a laugh and a snort. I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
But so far there's only one edit that I've found here, and that's just to correct a name that was misspoken. So that's all. This is all golden.
Cool.
Good tape, as Katie would say.
Need to do one for pollinators down the road
Yeah.
when you get tired
Mhm.
of plants.
Mhm.
Oh,
Yeah.
you
I
know,
like it.
that does, we could give them an update. We have, I'm not sure if you've seen this in the pictures of the garden, but surrounding the garden are, I think was it 14 of them, 12 of them, right? I'm talking about the mosaics.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Was
Those are
it
cool.
12?
Yeah.
12, yeah,
right
12
now we have
original.
12. 10
12
coming.
original mosaics from that we did a partnership with the arts instructor on our neighbor, Alan Hall. The instructor's name is Catherine Wiesner, and she does an amazing job with her students to design these incredible mosaics that Layne painstakingly installed into the decomposed granite. Well, Layne and I just had a conversation with Catherine, and this semester they are going to do another round. She and her students are going to do another round of them.
Ooh.
So Layne prepares the list of plants, and then we also have the wildlife that benefit from the garden. So that's also fair game. The students themselves choose from the list what they want to do, and then Catherine works with them on their design and execution. I know that they are, I mean, I think everybody loves them, but our special fans of those mosaic are our youngest garden lovers. Another neighbor of ours on campus is the Child Development Lab, and the teachers from the Child Development Lab will bring their little students around. I think they were the 3-year-olds. So you can imagine when you're that low to the ground, looking down and seeing something that's just for you down there really is engaging. So those students, we also heard, were really interested in construction. And so this spring, while the bridge was being built, they came by every day. They finally sent us a message asking us when the bridge was going to be built, because at some point the kids are like, is it today? Is it today? And after the bridge was built, I think, Layne, you pick up the story because you were there, I think, the first time they got to actually walk across the bridge after we passed inspection.
Yeah, it was incredible. There was probably, I don't know, 12, 15 3-year-olds being led by some teachers across the bridge, and the squeals and the like joy on their faces was incredible. And then, that was in June. So the garden's summer blooms were, at their peak, and the garden was just beautiful, beautiful. And it was covered with monarchs and hummingbirds. And I mean, they were just everywhere. So not only did they get to walk across the bridge for the first time, but they put their little hands on the rails looked over the garden, and there's all of these insects and birds and just life in general flying around them. And it was, I mean, the amazement on their faces was really, I mean, in that moment, it was like, this is why I do what I do.
This is why we all do what we do. It's it's just to know that you're influencing a next generation is incredible.
Absolutely.
So we have a special thanks to Kelly Harris, is the head teacher that brought her class out for the 3-year-olds. I think in watching them, Layne, every time you tell that story, you I imagine you as a 3-year-old, like
I probably would have been the one out there with the monarch pants,
because I think
running around. So
right, you were probably about that old when you fell in love with native plants at the first time, right?
Basically, I mean, there's a photo of me like rock climbing with my family, and I'm staring at this black-eyed Susan that's on this wall. Like, I'm not interested in the rocks or my family. I'm interested in this plant that's right in front of my face.
And I know there's a photo of me around that age. I didn't know about native plants at the time, but I fell in love with water and creeks from being taken on a creek hike by a family friend. Took myself and some of my other friends my age. So to be able, for Layne and I to be able to give those kinds of experiences for these kids is pretty incredible.
Yeah. And I mean, it's still great being able to give tours and such to people, college aged too.
It's never too late.
Right. We gave, I mean, we've inspired, I mean, I'll always think about Keegan out there. Keegan worked with us on a small project, and in the first like 2 or 3 weeks of working with us in the garden, he was like, you know what? I'm changing my major. And
don't tell animal science,
right?
But we got an NRES person
yeah.
out of Keegan.
Yeah, it's fun. It's really fun work.
So which is why we really think that everyone should consider learning about rain gardens, building rain gardens in their own backyard. Especially if you have kids, it's really a great way to talk about water and the water cycle, and then all of the pollinators that come to visit. There's so many really joyful things that can come from that. So it's really an honor to be part of rolling out the Rainscaping program and to be working with the Red Oak Rain Garden.
And we can leave links to the Rainscaping and the RORG website down below in the show notes.
Perfect.
I realize that we're at a very long podcast.
It's like the Lord of the Rings podcast, right?
Yeah.
We could talk forever about this, so please cut whatever you need.
Right.
So you mentioned people kind of doing some of this stuff at home. And so say somebody does want to do some of this rainscaping or some of this kind of native plant type stuff at home. You both have worked on some guides, putting together some guides, and by the way, they look awesome. I like them a lot for what it's worth. On different, planting with native plants. Can you tell us more about these guides that you've come up with?
The original idea for the guide was based off of my own experience of going to a native plant sale and either buying every plant in sight and never putting them in the ground. So it's confession time, or just leaving without buying anything because I was just too overwhelmed. And a brilliant friend of mine said, I want to do the right thing, but I just, I don't have time to research everything. I'm not a designer. And I just want someone to hand me a thing that says what to do. And I thought, what? That's really brilliant. And working for Extension, I'm in the position to be able to make that happen. And as I mentioned earlier, that was around the time that I met Layne, and I saw some of his work at a design expo. And it was precisely what we needed. And so Layne's beautiful designs and laying out the plants, it all kind of fell into place. I anticipated that we were going to make a rain garden brochure, probably a sun pollinator brochure, and a few things about those particular plants. The native plant list was based off of the Grand Prairie Friends plant sale, the experience that I had. But I'm going to hand it off to Layne to talk about, not only these, but the additional brochures. He's turning it into a series.
So the first brochure that we really started working on was a full sun rain garden. The brochures that we've put out are more like planting guides. In fact, they even have the subtitle of a native planting guide for such and such condition. But in the rain garden one specifically, we do link to an Illinois Indiana Sea Grant resource that will explain some of the more engineering sides of rain garden design. We've also put together a full sun pollinator garden design. We have a guide to a pretty large selection of Illinois native plants that can be used in the home landscape setting. And then our most recent publications has been what we're calling a woodland garden series. So we take shady conditions and a variety of moisture conditions, and we have a brochure that is filled with native plants and designs for each of those conditions. So there's 4 in that series. And then this year, we produced an Illinois Native Spring Ephemerals brochure that details some of the amazing, very early spring plants that you can include in all of these designs, that come up, they bloom, and then they go dormant for the summer months. Illinois has some amazing plants in that, and I'll be honest, that was one of my favorite projects to work on because I really love Virginia bluebells. So I got to really feature them in this new brochure. Some upcoming brochures that we have, much like what we did with the woodland series, we're going to do the same with like the prairie setting, more of your sun conditions. So we're going to have 4 different moisture conditions with the sun plantings. And again, those are going to utilize all Illinois native plants. They'll have the same design guides. All of the brochures have attribute tables, basically like what the plants need as far as sun and moisture goes, the kinds of attractions that they bring with them, whether it is bees or butterflies, birds, hummingbirds. We also have drought tolerance included in these brochures as well. And we're also going to expand on our rain garden series as well, so that we've got our full sun out there now, where we're going to have a shade rain garden, and we're probably going to explore some options for both of those as well, because rain gardens are becoming so popular. People really want them, and I think it would be great to have a couple of options for all of those conditions for rain gardens.
The Red Oak Rain Garden inspired the plants that are in the brochures. So that original 80 species that from the original design is part of that plant list, and the series themselves are based off of the biomes of the Red Oak Rain Garden, and the Layne, correct me if I'm wrong, but the 75% ground cover and that basis of designing with maintenance in mind, that is baked into your designs as well, right?
It is, yes. Yep.
And these resources, guys, we have plugged them several times on this podcast, and I got those links. I got them. I just got a document. I'm just going to copy paste them down below. These are amazing resources. Eliana, Layne, thank you so much for making these so that we can give these out to people across the state and help create habitat and make it a beautiful habitat.
thank you so much for distributing them around the state. That's exactly what we wanted to happen. And thanks so much for including it in the Farm Progress show. I saw a picture. It was so beautiful. You guys did a great job. It looked fantastic.
We will have to coordinate better next time because we were selecting plants, and it's really hard to find plants that are in bloom this late in the year. And so unless you want a mum or something like that. So,
Right.
but we got to get to a native plant nursery, and they had some great, we picked right from your list, and we organized everything. And so, yeah, it looked lovely. It was my favorite one there. So thank you so
Awesome.
much.
Oh, wow.
Fantastic.
And thank you again, Eliana and Layne, for being here on the podcast today. I know we can talk all afternoon about this, but we'll just have to save it till next time.
Thank you so much for having us on.
Thank you so much. This was really fun.
Well, the Good Growing Podcast is produced by Wendy Ferguson and edited by me, Chris Enroth. Hey, thanks goes out to Ken Johnson, Katie Parker, for being our faithful co-hosts every single week. Thank you, Katie and Ken.
Thank you, Eliana and Layne, for joining us. And Chris and Ken, it's good to see you guys again.
Eliana, Layne, thank you for being on again. Katie, Chris, thank you as always. And let's do this again next week.
Oh, we shall do this again next week. I hope to be on vacation, but who knows what's happening from day in, day out. Plans change very quickly. It seems like these last couple years. So, but listeners, I will thank you so much for listening, and watchers, thank you so much for watching us on YouTube. And as always, keep on growing. Ken, you're muted.
It doesn't say that it doesn't have the.
It doesn't show that he's muted though.
Ken, your microphone's broken.
There's your third edit, Chris.
There it is. Ken, I just have to keep hitting the cut button here.
Ken is speechless.
Ken is speechless.
Go. Thank you, Eliana and Layne. And
Thank
let's
you.
do it again next week.
Oh,
I was
Thank
gonna
you,
say,
Wendy.
we didn't even get to talk about the full acre of Lomo that's being
I
converted.
know.
To high
Oh
quality.
my
Full
gosh.
I
acre.
forgot about that.
Full
A
acre.
full acre.
It's
That's
not
gonna be
bird related.
long
so-
Yeah,
conversation.
it's
We
gonna
need
be
to
next
do a
door
part two.
though. It's Dorner Drive retention pond. We had the